Hello, sportsmen. Welcome to the second week of our new series. No, we haven't had time to get our musical theme recorded, but that'll be coming up in a month or so. The response was so overwhelming to last week's show that we're going to run the same format. We'll open up with a home video of a white deer very close to an albino. Our main feature is duck hunting at Drummond Island, which will take the mystery out of duck hunting. Kathy Beitler has a recipe for duck breasts. Plus, we'll take a look at the upcoming weekend, so you stay tuned. I'm Fred Trost with ideas on how you can become a more practical sportsman. Oh, yes.
Come on, Tim.
Oh, got one.
What do we have here? 2 white-tailed deer and a goat? No, that is actually 3 white-tailed deer, but the one is a white deer. That's a rarity in the deer world, but one that Ed Willauer from Ray, Michigan videotaped in August of 1990. Now, this was on his 20 acres of vacation property near Lewiston. Ed puts out feed for the deer in July and keeps feeding him through the winter. Now, in 1989, he saw this little buck for the first time. It was a twin with a little doe, but the mother and the twin were both normally colored. Now, this guy was mostly white. Ed was so excited that he went out and bought a video camcorder just to get some video of this deer. Now, it's a white deer, but it's not a true albino. You know how you can tell? Well, right there is the telltale sign. Now, that's a bad pun, but the tail is dark, almost black hair on the tail. True albinos have no pigment whatsoever in their bodies. All of their hair is white, their hooves are almost transparent, and their eyes are pink. So the telltale sign from a distance is often the tail. If it's dark, the deer is not a true albino. Although this deer is as close to being an albino as you'll find, it mixes with the other doe and the spotted fawn. Now, they're probably related to this white deer. Leonard Lee Roos says that white deer like this are mutations. Oftentimes, other non-related deer will drive them away. Leonard Roos says that white mutations like this are easy to sneak up on because usually they're hard of hearing. At least that's Lenny's experience. Ed Willauer used a tripod to steady his pictures, but it was a friction head tripod. You can see how the friction makes for very jumpy pans when he wants to move the camera. John Ford says that you can buy fluid head tripods nowadays for about $120. The fluid head allows you to move the camera smoothly and doesn't jerk like this. It's worth the investment for you home video buffs. Now, if this deer was colored normally, it would blend in with this dead grass, but being white, it stands out. That's why there weren't too many white deer in the United States 100 years ago. Wolves could spot a white deer a mile away, and they were the first to be eaten. But we don't have many wolves around anymore. This little buck made it for 3 years until this past summer when it was hit by a car. Ed said that it always seemed to be a little slower than its twin, and it seemed not to be as healthy as the other deer. That's often the case with mutations, and especially with albino deer. Now, this one wasn't a true albino. It had dark hair on its face and tail, dark hooves, dark nose, and eyes. But we thank Ed Willauer for sending us his home video of this extremely unusual buck.
You know, those home video cameras are great. They're small, the camcorders are lightweight, they're easy to store, they're fairly durable. But there's a problem if you have one of those little small, lightweight camcorders, and that is the picture often jiggles even when you breathe, and people tend to move around with their wrists as they're panning. Let me give you a suggestion if you don't use a tripod. Take your elbows, put them into your sides, and hold that camera right up against your face, right up against your eye. And don't move with your wrists. Move your whole body when you pan. That'll make the image much steadier, much easier to look at, and much more likely that your video will be picked to use on this show. Now, back to the subject of albino deer. Let's go over to the deer exhibit here at the museum. Deer with white markings are taken each year by hunters in Michigan. But what about true albinos? Are they taken by hunters? Well, not anymore. In 1990, the state legislature passed a law protecting albinos, so it's against the law to shoot one. But this albino buck right here was mounted in 1975 by Franklin Soltz. It has the characteristic white hair, colorless hooves, and pink eyes. Emerson Goff from Diamonddale was hunting Gogebic County in 1974 when he spotted this buck following a doe and a fawn. Back at camp, he checked the hunting regulations and found nothing prohibiting him taking an albino deer. So the next day, when this deer came by as blind, Emerson took it. Now, the DNR told Emerson that his buck was the first true albino reported in Michigan in 33 years. But remember, it's now against the law in Michigan to take a true albino deer.
Oh, I'm sure we could have left earlier, at daybreak, but the wind was howling in Pottaganessing Bay. We were staying at Weona Resort, and from our rooms, the sleet and snow and rain and wind didn't look too attractive during that first hour of daylight. But by 10 o'clock, the wind laid down and the temperatures warmed up, a little at least, to where duck hunting didn't sound like such a miserable experience. Why subject yourself to an experience you won't enjoy when the weather's so bad? That's my opinion anyway, and Tim Farragon agreed, so did Charlie Keenan, who was also in the boat, and John Ford behind the camera. Oh, he liked the idea of letting the weather die down a little bit. In areas that are heavily hunted, getting to your spot early is important, but today, nobody else was hunting ducks. Here's a group of diver ducks, along with some seagulls. Now, you don't hunt ducks from a moving boat, at least one that's under power from a motor. It's against federal waterfowl hunting regulations. Now, Tim Farragon unwinds the anchor rope from around the base of a decoy. This is how ducks and geese are generally hunted. The hunter is stationary with a group of anywhere, 24 to hundreds of decoys out in front. Now, we were using about 24 decoys.
Well, how far out do you want the furthest one, Tim?
Not very far.
Right here?
Well, at first glance, Tim's decoys don't look like they're sitting right. When they hit the water, they sit sideways until the ballast or keel underneath fills with water. Water ballast decoys are extremely lightweight, though. Easy to carry, easy to toss a long ways. When that hollow keel on the bottom fills with water, those decoys will sit straight up and down like they're supposed to. And to ducks flying overhead, these decoys bobbing on the water look like ducks that have found a good place to rest and feed. Now here come the first ducks, golden eyes. We're not camouflaged yet, we're standing up.
Turn off the motor, Freddie.
Motor's off.
Just landed.
Yeah. By golly. They want in here bad.
Well, they're not going to land until we get this up, I'm telling you.
What do you mean they're not going to land? They just did. I tell you, these ducks want in here bad. This is a nice little protected spot behind this island. Wind is not howling like it was last night, but it's blowing a pretty good clip. Fortunately, ducks like to come in at the same places where hunters like to come in, kind of get out of the elements. But the wind out in the open water should keep the ducks flying, keep them moving, and they've been coming right up the pipe here, right up in this calmer water, landing in these reeds. We've seen that, and that's why we have our decoys right on the edge. Now, one thing, we are not going back up against the shore and getting camouflaged in there like a lot of people would think we'd have to do. Because right now these ducks want in so bad, I think by putting the camo up on the sides of the boat here, like we're doing, is going to be enough camouflage. The ducks aren't going to be bothered if we keep our heads down by this floating raft we have here. And I think this is going to be a good spot. We got one duck sitting right out here in the decoys, landed as the motor was running, as we were throwing the decoys out.
Well, this just goes to show you how it's location that's the most important thing in duck hunting. If the ducks like where your decoys are, they won't be nearly as spooked by activity in a boat. And if you want a really versatile boat, a PVC plastic pipe frame can be bolted to the gunnels. This is what you use to stretch some canvas camouflaged material over. Makes a great duck hunting boat in the fall. And in the spring, take the canvas and the plastic pipe off and you have your fishing boat back. The canvas is tied to the pipe when you want that camo up.
When it's real cold, tying these bows can be difficult. It isn't too bad right now.
When we got the canvas sides up, the motor was off, the boat was anchored, we could begin duck hunting. Now, that means we sit still, scan the sky for little black specks, and give a few duck calls. That first flock of ducks turned, and they were coming back to the call.
Oh, Tim! At least 15 feet behind him. We'll see the pattern on the water.
Now, don't think I'm picking on Tim. We do a lot of shooting together, and he's usually right on, but I had an unusual chance to see his shot pattern on the water. Take a look at this. There's the duck. In slow motion, you can see the front of the shot string hits the water first, then more shot comes in behind it. But every microsecond that passes, that duck gets further away, and it's gone.
Oh, Tim! At least 15 feet behind him. We'll see the pattern on the water. Oh, man. We got to get way in front of those. Did you see your pattern?
Did I notice the pattern?
Yes.
Yes.
Did you see how far behind?
Well, that's the wind blowing the shot. I had the right lead, but I just didn't compensate for the wind.
You know, all shooters need to have ready-made excuses for when they miss. The story about the wind, well, that's a standard one. But I'm sure Tim will shorten his lead on the next duck. And here it comes.
Oh, yes.
Come on, Tim.
Oh, got one. Good work.
Now, we're not hunting with a dog, a retriever that we can send out to pick up those ducks. So what do you do if you don't have a dog? Well, you start up the motor and go get that duck yourself. Use a landing net that you use for fish in the summer and scoop up the duck. Now, because Michigan doesn't have the complicated point system it tried for a number of years, duck identification isn't such a problem. This duck is fairly common in Michigan. Not any wing color to speak of, has a light breast, but one key identification point is the light ring around the eye. It also has a mark on its bill. This duck is a ringneck. Well, not long after we got set up again, more ducks wheeled in. A group of 6 swung by, and 2 of them landed in the decoys. We let them sit there, thinking the others might come in to join them, and it looked for a moment like they were on their way in.
Flush him.
Now those other 3 are flying away. Let's go.
You ready?
My, we get another chance to look at shotgun patterns behind the ducks. Now, this is the most common mistake among duck hunters. The ducks are moving much faster than they look, especially the smaller ducks. High and behind. There we have 2 shot strings hitting the water, both of them behind the duck. Now, it's easy to see those water plumes in slow motion. Then we have another shot that's low and behind. Tim's last shot had the right lead, and the duck hit the water. So we pull the anchor, start the motor, grab the landing net, and head out for that down duck. Charlie Keenan is the net man. This time Tim Farragon got a duck that's easy to identify. That's not real popular among duck hunters because of its strong taste. It's a hooded merganser, also called a fish duck. The serrated bill, it's used to grab fish under the water. And the white feathered hood, well, that's unmistakable. This is a hooded merganser, not counted against the limit of 3 ducks. Now, waterfowl regulations are the most complicated of all hunting regulations. You must use steel shot. That costs about 50 cents a shell. Your gun must be plugged so it can't hold any more than 3 shells. Your small game license, state and federal duck stamps will cost you $28.70 in 1992, plus a few accessories.
Now this call is a little higher pitched. I think it kind of brings them in. At least they could hear it farther away, which I think is helping bring them in. This is a Falk's call. little bit lower. I don't think it has, can project as far. But this one, this was an Art Beecham call. He's from Flint, world champion duck caller. And this really cranks out the sound. No, doesn't have the projection.
Don't be afraid to try duck calling. It's not that complicated. You don't have to be a pro to turn ducks. Now here is what we've been waiting for. A couple of big, plump, tasty mallards. Oh, that was a classic. A pair of mallards swinging by on a cross shot. Now, they're not quite as fast as the smaller diving ducks. Mallards are much bigger in their body size. They tend to have more fat on their bodies, which makes them tasty. And they eat weeds and shallow water aquatic life, so they don't have any hint of a fishy taste like the diving ducks tend to pick up from their food. The mallard is the most common duck, at least in Michigan. You see them everywhere in municipal ponds, along urban creeks and rivers. That blue speculum on the wing with a white border on each edge, that identifies a mallard. Both the hen and the drakes have this blue and white speculum. And you can tell this is a drake by the green head. In fact, we often refer to male mallards as greenheads. The mallard, it's always been the bread and butter duck for duck hunters throughout the Midwest. Now here's what our decoy spread looked like to the ducks. Our boat was sitting where you see the 4 decoys on the left near shore, but the camouflaged boat didn't seem to bother the ducks. And if you have property on the water, you can build a permanent blind like this one. In the right location, they're great, but a boat has the advantage of being movable. You can move from one side of the lake to another, or you can move to a different lake. Now, duck calling isn't absolutely necessary, but if you can imitate the basic calls, you'll get the attention of more ducks and many more will come into your decoys. A 12-gauge gun is the standard with a modified or full choke, and keep in mind that when you do miss, you're probably shooting behind them.
Steel shot, remember, is required of all waterfowl hunting in Michigan. Now, it might save ducks from toxic poisoning in the marsh, but steel shot isn't malleable like lead. It's extremely hard, and if you're eating a duck dinner and you get one of these pellets chomped down on it, you could break a tooth. So make sure you get all this steel shot out of the duck meat before you cook it.
We have a recipe this week for EL duck by Terry Jarima, and I have no idea where EL comes from.
We've tried to think up, but we can't.
And it's got a marinade of rum and blackberry brandy.
Oh
Sounds,
boy.
yeah, sounds great already.
Well, yeah, EL just might be some sort of typo due to the rum and brandy. We don't know.
And I'm going to go ahead and put the breasts in here, and you do want to just parboil them. You don't want to cook them thoroughly.
You mean parboil in rum and brandy?
Right, exactly. Yep, I'm going to add a little bit of poultry seasoning and some onions and some salt and pepper. And then, like I say, you don't want to cook them until they're done, just until some of the color comes out of them.
This already, you know.
And then we got a whole plate full of veggies. Got 3 different kinds of peppers, some apples, carrots, celery, onions. Yep.
You know, I like duck and goose breast just on the grill. Just plain.
Yeah, well.
I can't imagine this.
Sit back and watch. It's going to be great. Got garlic powder and thyme. And then you're going to put the duck breasts on top of this.
Which have been boiled in brandy.
Right. And then we're going to add some jelly to it. Yep.
I don't know if whoever EL is must not like duck breast. I can't tell.
Yep. The veggies stay really good and crisp in this.
I can't wait to hear what Charlie Keenan says about it.
Well, you know, duck is like your mother-in-law, I think.
Oh, good. Here we go.
Oh, boy, oh, boy.
Either you like it or you don't, you know? There's not too much you can do to it, but this recipe right here is fantastic.
Fortunately, I like my mother-in-law, so the duck isn't too bad.
You know, so do I. That's why I can get off making that statement.
Well, other people would identify this with their mother-in-law. I would say this is interesting. Interesting. It is. Now, this particular duck
was apparently a diver, I would guess. Was the package labeled?
No, it wasn't labeled, but it was very, very well taken care of. I tell you what, the fillets were very, very well done. You know,
It
just-
does have that characteristic, what people might call liver, but it's very mild.
Right.
But it's down those lines.
Consistency, yep.
Yeah.
But yeah, the consistency and the flavor, but it is good. And this mix of vegetables,
They stayed crisp. I was really surprised at how crispy they stayed and didn't get soggy in there.
it's sort of like the KFC coleslaw, except in great big chunks. It really is. It is.
It's kind of like a Waldorf salad to me. I'll eat the
It's-
duck and leave the Waldorf salad aside.
So, if you have an interesting mother-in-law, invite her over for this interesting recipe. It is tasty.
Very good.
You can get a copy of this scrumptious recipe in our new Practical Sportsman magazine. It'll be out in about a month, and the address where you can write to get one is coming up at the end of the show. Now, a question for you. How many years does it take for a hunter to bag a big buck? Well, it all depends. Sue Wasmuth from Northville was hunting from a tree stand October 20th, Clare County, using a dart and bow with a 35-pound draw weight, which proves that a well-placed shot is more important than a heavy bow.
Well, there were 7 deer under me, and I had shot a doe the weekend before that, and I sure didn't figure on seeing a buck, because I figure, according to my husband, that you had to kind of pay your dues for 20 years before you see one of these things. So I was waiting, and I had put my bow down, and I heard this rustling. It sounded like antlers in the brush, and I says, "No, it couldn't be." But I picked my bow up anyway, and sure enough, here he comes around, and I shot him.
Man, what a deal. I mean, this is the second deer you've taken.
Yes,
How many years have you been hunting?
2.
2 years. Isn't that outstanding? And this happens to be the second largest buck taken by a woman this year in Michigan, right?
Right.
Congratulations, Sue Wasmuth.
Thanks, Fred.
Where did Sue Wasmuth get that buck? Right here, Clare County, a hotbed for big deer over the years. Now, Jay's Sporting Goods says that in some areas the deer are down, but there's lots of deer up in that country. They're getting some nice bucks coming into the buck polls. Pheasant hunting is good up in this mid-Michigan area. Ducks are also, they've been swarming into the flooded corn. We look up in the Alpena area. Limited edition taxidermy says the deer are starting to rut. Ducks have been slow, some flights have been coming in, and grouse hunting has been spotty. Bob Botke up at Weona Resort says perch fishing, look at this, very good, 100 perch a day, 8 to 12 inches in Pottaganessing Bay. The rut is going strong, he says, and rabbit hunting is good. Steve's Archery over here in Boyne Falls, Boyne City area, says brown trout, they're getting 2 to 3 per boat. That's the Harbor Springs area. They're 2 to 3 pounders. They're catching them on Rapalas. The rut is just starting for the deer, and lots of fall turkeys have been reported. Lakeland Outfitters at Whitehall says steelhead off the piers are good. Water is too high at the lower end of the river for steelhead. The perch in White Lake up and down. Grouse are been found in pockets, so they're spotty there too. Best Chance Charters at Saugatuck says goose hunting has been phenomenal, great, lots of flights coming down. Steelhead limits off the piers. Walleye to 7 pounds at the Allegan Dam, and the rut is on in this part of the state for big bucks. By the way, if you do not have your gun sighted in yet, a lot of sportsmen's clubs have sight-in days going on right now, including one more item here on the guide report, Dick's Favorite Sports. Up here in the Keweenaw, he says bow hunting is good, the rut is in full swing. They had a good finish to the duck season with those big blasts of air coming in from the north. Well, the outdoors is a great place to be. I hope to see you out there. Be safe, be practical, because I want to see you back here next week. Studio segments for this program were videotaped at the Practical Sportsman Museum in Bath, Michigan, where you can see Emerson Goff's true albino buck. Next week is our deer season preview. We'll talk about prospects for deer hunting around the state, regulations that affect hunters, things about white-tailed deer behavior that hunters need to keep in mind, an excellent venison recipe, and more. So join me next week for the Practical Sportsman right here on Public TV.